Among all the infidelity stories and tales of betrayal we see every day, some stories strike deeper. Stories so real and intense they leave permanent scars. Today, you're about to hear a cheating wife story unlike anything you've seen in Reddit cheating stories. A woman trapped in a cold marriage, a forbidden passion that set her life ablaze, and a choice that changed everything forever. Get ready. What you're about to hear could happen to anyone. Amanda had always been the kind of woman who dreamed of fairy tales. When she met Lucas, still in her 20s, she truly believed she had found her happily ever after. He was what many would call the complete package: intelligent, polite, hard-working. Lucas was never the type of man to shower a woman with flowers or grand surprises, but Amanda told herself that true love didn't need those things. It needed respect, security, and stability. And Lucas offered exactly that. In the first few years, Amanda felt grateful. Together, they built a modest home, with walls painted in soft tones and a small but always blooming garden. Amanda took care of every detail with love, from the cushions carefully placed on the couch to the dinner table she set religiously every evening. But over time, the house started to feel like just that, a house. No longer a home filled with laughter and shared glances. Lucas was hardworking, no one could deny that. He left early, came home late, paid all the bills on time. But with the responsibility also came silent absences. He was there, yes, but it felt as if he lived inside an invisible bubble that Amanda could never quite reach. The conversations dwindled. The playful teasing disappeared. Touches that were once spontaneous became mechanical, a rushed good morning kiss, a murmured good night, before turning to the other side of the bed. And Amanda, who still carried inside her the flame of a woman who wanted to be loved, touched, desired, found herself slowly fading away. She tried. She bought new lingerie that Lucas barely noticed. She cooked special dinners that ended with him sunk into the sofa, glued to the television. On wedding anniversaries, it was always Amanda who planned everything. Restaurant reservations, small gifts, while Lucas either forgot the dates or offered a cold, perfunctory thanks, like someone signing off a work report. On the outside, to anyone looking in, Amanda seemed to have a perfect life. A hard-working husband. A beautiful house. A long-standing marriage. But inside, day after day, she felt increasingly invisible. Increasingly alone. And it was through that silent crack, through that emptiness no one else could see, but that Amanda felt screaming inside her, that everything began to change. Because what no one truly understands until they experience it themselves is that loneliness isn't just being alone. Loneliness is being beside someone and still feeling cold. And Amanda was freezing. As the years went by, Amanda and Lucas's life shrank down to a series of predictable routines, as if each day was an exact replica of the one before. The alarm clock rang at 6 in the morning. Lucas left for work still half asleep while Amanda prepared coffee, using the same cup, placed in the same spot on the table, every single day. A quick kiss, as cold as the morning air, and he was gone. Throughout the day, Amanda kept herself busy. She worked part-time at a beauty clinic, took care of the house, did the shopping, paid the bills. In the late afternoon, she prepared dinner and waited for Lucas to come home. Sometimes she glanced at the clock and imagined, "Today he'll come home earlier. Today he'll surprise me." But what always walked through that door was the same exhausted man, tie loosened, cell phone still in hand, finishing up another work call. The dinner Amanda had prepared so lovingly was eaten in silence. The most she heard was a mumbled, "It's good," between bites. When conversations did happen, they revolved around bills to pay, car repairs needed, or Lucas's endless work problems. Never a, "How was your day?" Never a, "I missed you." The worst was Friday nights. Amanda dreamed of an impromptu invitation, dinner out, a movie, a spontaneous weekend getaway. But Lucas preferred to stay home, sprawled on the couch, watching shows Amanda didn't even like. And her? She sat beside him, quiet, like another piece of furniture in the room. She had stopped asking, stopped hoping. But inside, the absence of what wasn't said, of what wasn't done, weighed on her like stones. Their bedroom became just a place to sleep. The affectionate touch before sleep became a distant memory. The nights were cold, each turning to their own side, like two strangers sharing the same bed. Sometimes Amanda woke up in the middle of the night, looked at Lucas sleeping beside her, and felt a suffocating tightness in her chest. Is this what marriage becomes after years? she wondered. Am I wrong for wanting more? Little by little, without realizing it, Amanda began to change. The easy smile faded. The energy she once put into everything slowly died. She started living on autopilot, just like Lucas, but inside her, the emptiness grew larger, festering like a wound she no longer knew how to heal. And it was then, without her knowing, that the universe began moving the pieces on the board. Someone was about to cross her path. And that story, the story Amanda never imagined she would live, was just about to begin. Amanda's life dragged on like this, until one seemingly ordinary morning, something different happened. Amanda arrived at work, an elegant beauty clinic in the heart of the city, and immediately noticed something unusual at the front desk. Low laughter, whispered conversations, and then she saw him. Standing by the counter was a man who looked like he had stepped straight out of one of those movies Amanda used to watch alone on Saturday nights. Tall, broad-shouldered, his hair slightly tousled in that effortless, charming way. And the smile. A smile so spontaneous it seemed to warm the cold air around him. His name was Eduardo, the new administrative manager the company had hired to reorganize the internal departments. Amanda tried to act natural, but her heart beat a little faster. It wasn't just his appearance, though it was impossible to ignore, it was the energy he carried. A vibrant, alive presence, completely different from the dull routine Amanda was used to. On their first interaction, Eduardo was polite. He shook her hand firmly, looking straight into her eyes, something Amanda hadn't felt in a long time. And in that brief look, there was something more. It wasn't just courtesy. It was curiosity. Throughout the day, Amanda saw him walking around the clinic, chatting with the receptionists, exchanging ideas with the marketing team. He was one of those men who truly knew how to listen. He paid attention, laughed at the right moments, showed genuine interest in what others had to say. And, of course, everyone noticed. Amanda's co-workers wasted no time gossiping in the clinic's WhatsApp group. The new manager is a total heartthrob, huh? If I were single. Amanda laughed at the messages, but deep inside, something stirred. It wasn't just innocent admiration. It was a spark so small it could almost be ignored. Almost. In the days that followed, Eduardo started interacting more with Amanda. Small hallway conversations, subtle jokes while grabbing coffee in the break room. Nothing inappropriate, nothing that crossed the line. But Amanda felt it. She felt it in the way he held her gaze just a second too long. She felt it in the slight, crooked smile he gave whenever she entered a room. She felt it in her own body, reacting without her permission, a discreet shiver, a warmth on her skin, a silly flutter of nerves before passing him in the hallway. It was as if, after living in black and white for so long, Amanda had stumbled into an explosion of color. And she didn't even know yet. But that first contact would only be the beginning of something that would change everything. After that first encounter, something invisible started vibrating between Amanda and Eduardo. It wasn't spoken aloud. It was felt, like a silent electricity that filled the air whenever they were near each other. At first, Amanda tried to ignore it. She pretended not to notice when Eduardo walked past her a little too slowly in the hallway, leaving behind a woody scent that invaded her senses and made her close her eyes for just a second longer. She pretended not to feel how he leaned in slightly whenever he listened to her, bringing their faces just a little closer than necessary, making her heart lose its rhythm. But it was useless. Every time Eduardo spoke to Amanda, his voice seemed to reach her at a different frequency, a frequency only she could hear. The conversations always started simply. Have you tried that new cafe down the street? It's cold today, huh? But underneath those casual words, there was an unspoken subtext. A dangerous game that Amanda was slowly beginning to accept, even if she couldn't yet admit it to herself. One afternoon, after a heavy rainstorm that paralyzed the city's traffic, the clinic was almost empty. Amanda was gathering some supplies in the conference room when she heard Eduardo's voice behind her. Need a hand? She turned, slowly, as if already knowing who she would find, and there he was, leaning casually against the doorframe, hands in his pockets, easy smile, heavy gaze. Amanda held her breath. The room felt smaller. The air, thicker. He stepped in, casually grabbing some folders, making light jokes along the way. And then, between one laugh and another, their hands touched, an accidental, quick touch. But it left a trail of heat traveling up Amanda's arm, as if her skin had been branded. She pulled away, laughing nervously, saying something silly about the mess of the folders. But inside, Amanda felt it. She had crossed an invisible line. It wasn't just attraction anymore. It was desire. Pure. Raw. Pulsating. That night at home, while Lucas sat watching television without even noticing her presence, Amanda found herself replaying the moment in her mind 1,000 times. The look. The touch. The tension. She tried to convince herself it was just a foolish fantasy. That it meant nothing. But deep down she knew. Once that door had cracked open, there would be no closing it again. And for the first time in a long time, Amanda felt something that both scared and excited her. She wanted more. Much more. The days passed, but that touch, that look, that unbearable tension, kept pulsing in Amanda's memory like a song she couldn't stop hearing. And then, it happened. It was a hectic morning at the clinic. The company's director had scheduled a surprise visit, and everyone was rushing around, fixing papers, organizing rooms, trying to look perfect. Amanda was in the archive room, perched on a small ladder, stretching her arms to reach a folder that, of course, was on the very top shelf. She reached further, struggling to keep her balance, when she felt the ladder wobble slightly. Before she could even call for help, firm hands caught her waist. Eduardo. He was there. So close. She could feel the heat of his hands through the thin fabric of her blouse, his breath brushing the back of her neck, his touch firm and yet careful. For a second that felt like it stretched into hours, Amanda froze. She could have climbed down, stepped away, thanked him coolly and pretended nothing had happened. But that's not what her body did. Instinctively, she turned her head, as if searching for him. And their eyes locked. It was in that moment Amanda realized. It wasn't just her. There was desire there. Pulsating. Screaming silently between them. Eduardo's easy smile faded. In its place was a serious, heavy look, filled with unspoken intentions. His hands still held her waist, but now neither of them seemed to remember the excuse of the unsteady ladder. For a few endless moments, they stayed like that. Frozen. Breathing the same thick, charged air. Amanda felt her throat go dry. Her skin tingled, electric. Every cell in her body screamed for her to close the distance between their lips. But she knew that if she moved even an inch closer, there would be no going back. Then, as if waking from a trance, Amanda looked away, gently pulled herself free from his hands, and stepped down from the ladder, her legs trembling like she had just run a marathon. Thank you. Her voice came out softer than she intended. Eduardo just nodded, saying nothing, his eyes still locked on her, speaking all the words they couldn't dare say out loud. Amanda hurried out of the room, her heart pounding, her cheeks burning. She leaned against the hallway wall, closed her eyes, and tried to catch her breath. It was in that instant she understood. She wasn't just flirting with danger anymore. She was submerged in it, neck deep. And to her surprise, she loved the feeling. After that touch, after that exchange of glances that said far more than words ever could, Amanda knew. There was no more pretending. The days that followed dragged like silent torture. Amanda tried to act normal, smiling at the right times, avoiding his gaze, keeping her professional posture. But every time she crossed paths with Eduardo in the hallway, the air around her felt thinner, harder to breathe. He, on the other hand, seemed to master the game with ease. He didn't push, he didn't pressure. He was simply there. Present. Available. Like a silent temptation, waiting for Amanda to come to him by her own choice. And she knew that sooner or later, it would happen. It was on a rainy Friday, one of those days when the entire city seems to slow down, that everything aligned. It was the end of the workday, most employees had already gone home, and Amanda was finishing up some overdue paperwork. The sound of rain beating against the windows filled the silence of the empty clinic. Suddenly, she heard footsteps in the hallway. She turned and found Eduardo leaning casually against the doorframe, his blazer slung over one shoulder, the top buttons of his white shirt undone. He looked at her in a way that made Amanda's heart almost explode inside her chest. "Are you staying late?" he asked, his voice low and husky. Amanda tried to smile casually, but her lips trembled slightly. "Just a little longer," she replied, without much conviction. Eduardo took 2 steps into the room. The distance between them was now small. Small enough for Amanda to catch the scent of his skin, that warm blend of woody cologne and something uniquely his, intoxicating. He didn't say anything else. There was no need for words. The silence spoke for them. Amanda clutched the papers in her hands, but her palms were sweating. Her entire body was on high alert, as if part of her was screaming to run, and another much stronger part was begging her to stay. It was Eduardo who broke the spell. With a half smile, he said, "If you want, there's a little bar open nearby. Not far. Just to unwind a bit. No rush." This was it. The choice. The moment. Amanda looked at him. Looked down at the papers in her hands. She thought about Lucas, probably already at home, sitting on the couch, the television on, the phone in his hand, as distant as ever. She took a deep breath, closed the folder and set it down on the table. And with a shy, almost conspiratorial smile, she answered, "Okay, let's go." In that instant, without fully realizing it, Amanda crossed the line. The invisible line between desire and action. Between wanting and choosing. And even though she didn't know exactly what awaited her that night, deep down, she already knew. Nothing would ever be the same again. The bar was small, almost hidden on a side street, with low lighting, rustic wooden tables, and the comfortable smell of coffee mixed with rain. There was no loud music. Just a soft ambient sound, as if the entire place had been designed for whispered conversations, or for discreet sins. Amanda and Eduardo chose a table tucked away in a corner, far from the entrance. The world seemed to shrink down to the small space between them. Everything else faded away, the cars passing outside, the murmur of other customers, even the rain drumming against the roof sounded distant. At first, the conversation was casual. They talked about their childhoods, favorite movies, the places they dreamed of visiting. But it only took a lingering look, a pause in a sentence, a nervous laugh, for the atmosphere to shift. The electricity was there, constant, growing, like a storm about to break loose. Amanda felt alive again. Every smile, every word exchanged was like a spark reigniting something she thought had died inside her long ago. She sipped her wine slowly, more to keep her hands busy than out of thirst. Eduardo watched her with an intensity that left her breathless, as if she were the only person in that bar, in that city, in that entire world. And then it happened. Amanda said something ordinary, a joke about her own work, and laughed, tilting her head back, exposing the delicate line of her neck. And Eduardo looked at her in a way that said it all. There was no more waiting. He leaned over the table slowly, as if giving her time to pull away. But Amanda didn't pull away. On the contrary. She stopped laughing, held her breath, and the time between them simply disappeared. The first kiss was firm and decisive, without doubts, without asking for permission. It was as if all those cold nights beside Lucas, all those years of absent touches, crumbled at once in that single moment. Amanda tasted the wine on Eduardo's lips, felt the heat of his skin, the scent of his woody cologne mixed with the smell of rain. She clutched at his shirt, pulling him even closer, as if trying to engrave that moment into her skin, her bones, her soul. There was no longer right or wrong. No more what-ifs. There was only them. There. Consumed. When they finally pulled apart, Amanda's eyes were glistening with tears. Not from sadness, but from something deeper, something ancient. A desire so long repressed that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to be truly wanted. Eduardo rested his forehead against hers and whispered, "This should have happened a long time ago." Amanda smiled, a small, bittersweet, victorious smile. That night, while the rain continued to fall outside, Amanda crossed a point of no return. She knew that from that moment on, her life would be divided into two chapters. The before him, and the after. And, strangely, she didn't feel fear. She felt freedom. When they pulled apart, Amanda's eyes were filled with tears. Not from sadness, but from something deeper, something ancient. A desire so long repressed that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to be truly desired. Eduardo rested his forehead against hers and whispered, "This should have happened a long time ago." Amanda smiled, a small, bittersweet, victorious smile. That night, as the rain continued to fall outside, Amanda crossed a point of no return. She knew that from that moment on, her life would be divided into two chapters. The before him, and the after. And, strangely, she didn't feel fear. She felt freedom. It was a gray Saturday, one of those days when the city seems suspended in time. Lucas had traveled for work that weekend, and Amanda, alone at home, felt the crushing weight of silence on her shoulders. In the early afternoon, a simple message flashed on her phone screen. "I'm coming over. Don't say no." Amanda's heart leapt. She didn't even try to resist. She didn't want to. Half an hour later, Eduardo parked discreetly a few houses down the street. Amanda opened the door before he could even knock. The look they exchanged didn't need words. The tension of the past days now demanded a conclusion. When he stepped inside, Amanda closed the door behind her and leaned her back against it, her chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths. For a moment, they just stood there, looking at each other, as if every inch of distance between them was burning. Then Eduardo crossed the space between them in a hungry, unstoppable impulse, and their lips crashed together in a kiss that asked for no permission, that recognized no boundaries. Amanda clung to him as if her life depended on it. Eduardo lifted her effortlessly into his arms, carrying her through the house, bumping into furniture, brushing against walls, laughing between urgent kisses. They made it to the bedroom. Amanda felt the mattress against her back, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't want to think about consequences, about guilt, about promises made years ago. She wanted to feel. She wanted to live. And she did. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered word in her ear was an explosion of sensations that had been dormant for years. Eduardo explored her body like someone discovering a new territory, with hunger, but also with reverence. It was different from anything she had ever known. There was no rush, no obligation. There was pure, mutual, sincere desire. Amidst the heat of their bodies, their skin pressed together, Amanda heard her own voice, low, broken, pleading, escaping without control. "Please, don't stop, never stop." And Eduardo obeyed. He didn't stop. Hours passed like minutes. The rain outside intensified, but inside that bedroom, time seemed to have frozen, trapped in that whirlwind of passion, surrender, and rediscovery. When they finally fell asleep, Amanda was curled against his chest, listening to the steady slowing of his heartbeat. A strong, present heartbeat, so different from the silence she had grown used to beside Lucas. She knew it wasn't just sex. It was refuge. It was a reunion with the woman she had left behind long ago. And in that moment, Amanda made a silent vow to herself. She would not let go of this, no matter the cost. Because after feeling what it was like to be truly desired, accepting anything less would be a slow death. After that weekend, Amanda entered a state she couldn't even explain. It was as if she lived in two parallel universes, two worlds clashing inside her every second of the day. In the mornings, she woke up next to Lucas, feeling the weight of her wedding ring on her finger, a cruel reminder of the life she had once promised to live. She smiled at him, made the coffee, listened to his complaints about work, and yet, inside, she was consumed by memories of Eduardo's warm skin against hers, his hungry kisses, his whispered words that still echoed in her mind. She pretended everything was normal. She cleaned the house, went shopping, absent-mindedly watched television while Lucas spoke about football or politics. But her body betrayed her mind. A simple accidental brush of hands, the scent of his forgotten shirt on the sofa, everything made her shudder with guilt. And still, she wanted more. With every message from Eduardo, sometimes just a single word, an emoji, a thinking of you, Amanda's stomach twisted in anticipation. Her heart would race, her skin would prickle, as if she were being touched from a distance. It was as if her whole body had been rewired to react to him. And deep down, she knew, it wasn't just physical. It was something deeper. It was the feeling of being seen, desired, remembered. At work, the secret meetings continued, each one more intense, more dangerous than the last. Sometimes, Amanda would catch herself in the clinic's bathroom mirror, her clothes slightly disheveled, her lipstick smudged, trying to rebuild the image of the perfect wife before returning to her desk. And there was always that moment, right after each encounter, when the guilt crushed her. She would look herself in the eye and ask, "What am I doing? Who have I become?" But the answer came too quickly. Someone who is finally alive. At night, lying beside Lucas, Amanda fought to calm her mind. She smelled the neutral scent of her husband, listened to his rhythmic breathing in the darkness. And she remembered Eduardo, the heat, the hunger, the surrender. It was like being adrift between two seas. On one side, the lifeless security she had always known. On the other, the intense storm that made her feel like a woman again. And even knowing that each encounter dragged her deeper into a path of no return, Amanda couldn't, or maybe didn't want to, stop. Because the guilt was unbearable. But the excitement was irresistible. And she was already addicted. What at first had felt thrilling, liberating, now began to exact its price. Amanda woke up every day with her heart squeezed tight, feeling as though she were carrying a ton of weight on her back. The weight of guilt, of secrets, of all the lies she had to invent, was suffocating. At first, lying had been easy, almost automatic. An extra meeting at work. A traffic jam. A visit to a friend no one ever actually saw. But now, every lie was harder to sustain. Amanda forgot what she had said the day before. She mixed up times, invented stories that didn't quite fit together. And Lucas, though distracted, was no fool. He started looking at her differently, with that silent suspicion that hurts more than any words. Sometimes, in the middle of an ordinary conversation, he would throw out unexpected questions. "Where did you say you were yesterday? Weren't you having dinner with Camila? Because Camila told me she was traveling." Amanda stammered, invented new excuses, tried desperately to patch the holes in her story. But with every new lie, she felt a little more broken. The exhaustion was physical too. She slept poorly, had nightmares, woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, imagining Lucas discovering everything. Sometimes she dreamed that Lucas was reading her hidden messages, confronting her, leaving her, and the fear of abandonment woke her up, crying silently beside him as he slept. During the day, at work, Amanda lived in constant theater. She smiled at her coworkers, pretended everything was fine, when in truth, her mind was a storm. Even Eduardo noticed. He would ask, concerned, "Are you okay?" And Amanda, with a tired smile, would answer, "Just a little stressed." But it wasn't just stress. It was emotional exhaustion. It was the constant conflict between what she felt and what she knew was right. Amanda no longer knew who she was. The confident, sweet, dream-filled woman had gotten lost somewhere along that dark path. And what remained now was someone torn between guilt and desire, between truth and lies, between an old worn-out love and a forbidden, devastating passion. She wanted to stop. She wanted to find a way out. But every time she thought about ending it, fear paralyzed her. The fear of losing Eduardo. The fear of losing Lucas. The fear of being alone. It was like being trapped in a snare she had set for herself. And with every lie she told, the hole grew deeper. Amanda was tired. Very tired. And deep down, she knew. This story couldn't go on like this forever. Sooner or later, one way or another, everything would explode. Amanda knew she couldn't live like that forever. But still, she tried to postpone the inevitable. She tried to balance the two lives, walking a tightrope that grew thinner each day. But Eduardo wasn't the kind of man who would agree to live in the shadows for long. It was just an ordinary afternoon. The sun was setting slowly, painting the sky in shades of gold, and Amanda was sitting in Eduardo's car, parked discreetly on a side street, far from the clinic. She stared out the window, avoiding his gaze, while Eduardo drummed his fingers impatiently on the steering wheel. The silence between them was heavy. Not the comfortable kind between two people who understand each other. It was a silence of pressure, of decision. Finally, Eduardo spoke, his voice firm, though not aggressive. "We can't keep going like this, Amanda." She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to hold back the tears that were already threatening to fall. "I love you," he continued, with a raw sincerity that made her shiver. "But I don't want to be the other man forever." Amanda turned to him, her throat tight, her heart pounding too hard to allow an immediate response. Eduardo reached out, taking her hand firmly, as if trying to anchor her to that moment. "Stay with me. For real." It wasn't a casual request. It wasn't an offer for another hidden weekend, another afternoon of forbidden kisses. It was a request for a life. For a future. Amanda felt the weight of that choice crushing her shoulders. If she accepted, she would have to face Lucas, tell the truth, destroy a marriage that, despite its coldness, was still part of who she was. She would face judgment, lose friends, and maybe even live to regret it. If she refused, she would lose Eduardo, the only living flame that still warmed her soul. She looked at him. At those eyes that saw her, desired her, promised her a new life. And for the first time in a long time, Amanda realized it wasn't just about love. It was about who she wanted to be. A woman who keeps pretending. Or a woman who has the courage to start over, even amidst the ruins? The car felt too small for the colossal decision Amanda had to make. Outside, the world kept turning, indifferent to the pain consuming every fiber of her body. She swallowed hard. Fear pulled her backward. Desire, and perhaps something even greater than desire, pushed her forward. Amanda squeezed Eduardo's hand. And in silence, without making any promises, she knew there would be no turning back. A choice had to be made. And she would have to pay the price. Amanda spent the entire weekend unable to sleep. Eduardo's words echoed in her mind like a drumbeat. Stay with me. For real. Fear was tearing her apart. But what crushed her even more was the feeling of living a lie, day after day, night after night. So, on that rainy Monday, when Lucas came home from work and carelessly tossed his keys onto the table, Amanda knew. There was no more time to wait. No more pretending. They sat down for dinner as usual, the clinking of cutlery against plates filling the uncomfortable silence. Lucas talked about office problems, about the chaotic traffic, about trivial things. And Amanda listened like someone watching a movie in a foreign language, distant, disconnected. Her heart was pounding so hard she could barely swallow the food. Her hands trembled under the table. Until suddenly, Lucas stopped talking. He looked at her. Really looked. And asked, bluntly, "Is there something you want to tell me?" Amanda froze. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. It was as if, in that moment, he knew. Maybe not every detail, but enough. Amanda set her fork down. She looked at her own hands, searching for courage somewhere inside herself. "Lucas," she began, her voice trembling, weak. "I need to be honest with you." He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. His face was a mixture of restrained anger and sadness. I got involved with someone else." The words came out in a whisper, barely audible. But their impact was like an explosion in the room. Lucas closed his eyes. Took a deep breath, like a man trying to stay standing while the ground crumbled beneath him. For a few seconds, long, endless seconds, he said nothing. Then, abruptly, he stood up from the table, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. He paced back and forth across the room, running his hands through his hair, over his neck, trying to process what he had just heard. Amanda wanted to say more, to explain, to apologize, to justify the unjustifiable. But no words seemed enough. "How long?" he finally asked, his voice rough and choked. Amanda lowered her gaze. "A few months." Lucas let out a dry, bitter laugh. "While I was working like a fool, you?" He didn't finish the sentence. Tears began to fall down Amanda's cheeks, silent, burning. Lucas looked at her one last time, a look Amanda would never forget, heavy with pain, with betrayed love, with a disappointment so deep it seemed to slice through the air. "I hope it was worth it," he said, before grabbing his coat and walking out the door without looking back. Amanda stayed there, alone. The sound of the door slamming echoed inside her like a final sentence. She knew that, in that moment, something inside her, and between them, had died forever. And strangely, in the midst of despair, there was also a feeling of relief. A brutal, devastating feeling, but a true one. The truth, as painful as it was, had finally come to light. And now, Amanda would have to face the consequences. Alone. In the first few days after Lucas left, Amanda could barely breathe. The house felt bigger, emptier, colder. Every room carried silent memories. The dinners eaten in silence. The rushed mornings. The forgotten anniversaries. And also, to her surprise, the small gestures of affection she only now realized had existed. She didn't call Lucas. And he didn't call her either. It was as if an entire chapter of her life had been ripped out all at once, without a goodbye, without a chance to revisit the pages. In the middle of that silent storm, there was Eduardo. He was kind, attentive, present. In the first week, Amanda moved into his small apartment, a messy, cozy place that smelled of strong coffee and had books scattered everywhere. At first, everything felt like a dream. They woke up together, shared long kisses in the morning, laughed over the silliest things. It was as if Amanda had become that vibrant, lively girl she thought she had lost. But reality soon began to show itself. And, like all realities, it was harsh. There was no more charm in secret meetings, no more adrenaline of stolen minutes. Now it was the day-to-day. Now it was real coexistence. Eduardo wasn't perfect. He was impulsive, messy, sometimes impatient. He had habits Amanda had never noticed before, like leaving wet towels on the bed, forgetting important appointments, or closing himself off in silence when something bothered him. Small things. But together, they started to weigh. And there was still the shadow of guilt, the one Amanda carried everywhere. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, she would wake up with a start, imagining Lucas somewhere, alone, broken, trying to pick up the pieces she had left behind. And even though Eduardo did everything he could to make her happy, there were moments when Amanda looked at him and felt a pang of sadness she couldn't explain. It wasn't regret over what she had lived with Eduardo. It was mourning for what she had lost. It was the bitter realization that, in real life, happiness never comes without scars. Amanda now knew. The freedom she had so desperately sought came at a very high price. She gained passion, intensity, life. But she also lost something she might never fully recover. Her innocence, her blind trust, her comforting illusion that it was possible to live without hurting anyone. And deep down, she knew, no matter how much she tried to build a new beginning, the past would always live within her, like an invisible scar, but a deep one. Months went by. Amanda and Eduardo stayed together, trying to build a new life over the ruins of the past. Some days were good. Others, not so much. They traveled, laughed, made plans for the future. But deep inside, Amanda carried something that even Eduardo's love couldn't erase. The awareness of what she had left behind. It wasn't just Lucas. It was the Amanda she used to be. The woman who believed she could love someone forever without losing herself along the way. Sometimes, alone in their room while Eduardo slept, she found herself wondering, was it inevitable? If I had tried harder, would it have been different? But those questions had no answers. And Amanda had learned, the hard way, that life isn't made of easy choices. It is made of losses, of scars, of new beginnings that are never as clean as we would like them to be. She didn't regret what she had felt with Eduardo. She didn't regret seeking life, desire, intensity. But she also acknowledged the pain she had caused, and that pain was now part of her, just like the happy memories. Her love for Eduardo was real. But it was also more mature, less illusory. They knew each other's flaws. They knew that to keep what they had alive, they would have to fight against wear and tear, against routine, against the old shadows that still lingered. Amanda was no longer the naive woman who believed in fairy tales. She was a woman marked by life, tougher, but also more self-aware. She knew the price of freedom, and she was willing to pay it. Because, in the end, living, truly living, always demands courage. Courage to break away. Courage to lose. Courage to move forward, even while carrying the invisible scars life inevitably leaves. Amanda didn't know what the future would hold. But she knew that, this time, she would walk forward with her eyes wide open. She knew that, even amid guilt and longing, she had found something precious. Herself. And sometimes, that's all that really matters.